Hey there, Resume Leslie here, and thank you so much for joining us for another edition of Behind Hiring with my co-host Niatu Binti Angel. Hey Niatu, how are you?
I'm good, Leslie. How are you doing today?
I'm good. I'm good. I'm excited to be here. I was not feeling well last week, so I didn't get to go live. So it's great to be back in the routine and back going live again.
I'm sorry to hear that. I'm glad you're recovered and able to come here and broadcast with us today.
Yeah, excellent. For those of you who are joining us, please go ahead and tell us where you're watching from in the comments. Give this video a like. Niatu, where are you joining us from today? It looks like you're in a slightly different location, yeah?
Yeah. So thankfully my shirt matches the picture behind me, even though this is not my office. But I did not have internet this morning at my apartment, and so I had to come over to my wife's place of work. Thankfully, it's a spare office. One of the people that she supervises is not working today, is not in the office today, and so this office became my temporary studio. So I'll be broadcasting here. Pardon the not being front lit. I only have a harsh fluorescent light above me. We're going to make it work for today, and hopefully things are going to go smoothly as always.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. No big deal. We were saying before we went live, it's just one stream. Everything kind of in the last 18 months or so has gotten a little bit more casual, and I really appreciate that. So I think that's
Yeah.
no big deal at all. All right, let's see who is joining us here. Of course, as always, we have my partner Andy in the chat. He is here to help us bring out questions. He'll be sharing any links that might be helpful throughout the stream today. So we are in Quartzsite, Arizona. It is nice and beautiful and warm here. Nia, too, you said it's starting to get chilly where you are, yes?
Yeah, so it's a little cold in the office, but over here in New Jersey, it is fall. The leaves are changing and the weather is also turning. It hasn't quite made up its mind yet if it's, going to be cold or hot on a given day, but you got to dress in layers. So here I am with layers today.
Nice. Perfect. Perfect. We have Krista here from Grand Rapids, Michigan. That is so cool. My partner Andy is actually from Grand Haven, which is not far from Grand Rapids at all. Good to see you, Krista. We've got Linda here from Boston. Excellent. We've got someone here from Virginia. For some reason, we're not getting your name, but thank you all the
Yeah.
same for being here. We've got Andrea from Maryland. Good to see you, Andrea. Greetings from Seattle, said Stephen. Hey there. Harlany, good to see you here.
Hey,
Thanks for
Harleny,
joining
what's up?
us. This is fantastic. So continue to let us know where you're watching from. If you're catching the replay, you can comment hashtag replay and let us know that that's what you're catching and let us know where you're joining that from. As we mentioned, today is, of course, Behind Hiring, where we ask or we interview hiring insiders and experts and talk all about behind the scenes, behind the curtain of the hiring process. Today, we have an awesome guest. Diana Y.K. Chan is joining us. As we get into the interview, if you as a viewer have questions, go ahead and get them into the chat. Nia, too, tell them how to get their questions as visible as possible.
Sure. So our little technique, borrowed from Sonal Ball, a good friend and colleague of both of ours, is to, if you have a question, write the word question in all caps before the question. That'll make it easier for Leslie and Andy to spot it in the comments and allow us to do our best in getting to your questions during the broadcast.
Yes, absolutely. So get your questions in there. Diana wants to know, what are you interested in learning today? She is our guest, so I'm sure she'd be thrilled to get to any questions you have or anything you are interested in learning in. All right, without any further ado, let's go ahead and introduce Diana. She is a former recruiter turned executive career coach with expertise in branding, marketing, and selling yourself effectively. Her mission really is to empower you in your own greatness with confidence so that you can gain a competitive edge and advance your career. And that just fits in so well with what Niatu and I are all about. So she's a great guest. Her clients get incredible results. So she has a lot to share to help you in your job search. She also is originally from Hong Kong and moved to Canada on her own when she was 16. So she has a ton to share from a personal standpoint as well. All right, without any further ado, let's introduce Diana. Hey there, Diana.
Hey, Leslie. Hi, Nia, too. Thank you so much for having me. I am so delighted to be here today. Hello, audience. How are you? Thank you for having me.
Love your energy. This is going to be great. A lot of fun. I can tell already.
Harlany says, my favorite people showing love. Everybody's excited to be here. Diana, do you want to share anything about yourself? What it means to you to be an executive career coach? I know you just recently passed your 10-year mark. Is that right?
Yes, that's correct. Yeah, I started my business in January 2011. So this year I celebrated my 10 years and I really love what I do. Like what fulfills me is really transformation, seeing my clients lit up and really going after their big dreams. One of my favorite saying is to own your greatness with confidence to shine. I really believe that when you step into your own greatness, your uniqueness of what makes you awesome, this is where you can also make a great impact in the world there.
I love it. I love that. That's fantastic. Gave me a little bit of chills there hearing you talk about your passion. That's very, very cool. Okay, let's go ahead and just dive into our questions. So, as a former recruiter and now a career coach, what are some of the biggest mistakes you think are tripping up job seekers in a modern job search? And what should job seekers be doing instead?
Yeah. So, I mean, I've been a recruiter for a long time and now I've been a coach for the past decade as well, where I supported like thousands of clients. A few things that jump out. One is really having that lack of clarity. And what I see a lot of times when people come to me is they tend to start with updating their resume first before really knowing what is it that they want to go after. And one of the things that I always love to say is you need to really do the soul searching before job searching. And I've seen time and time again from those who actually take that to us time to do this foundation work, they be present in a more effective way. So that's number one, the lack of clarity. Number two is really having that lack of strategy and plan. So most of the times, I want to hear from the audiences here, like, what's your approach to your job search? At least I would say 99% of the time I hear from people is applying online. That's like really their only plan or strategy. So really the key here is we really need to diversify your job search strategy, how you go about searching to generate more opportunities there. And then number three is really having that lack of compelling positioning. So this really ties into this whole personal branding piece, how to differentiate, what are your unique selling points. A lot of times in terms of the resumes I see or even the interviews that I practice with my clients, we tend to start with more the responsibilities of what we've done and really missing the what we've done well or what has really differentiated us there. So if we can really focus on thinking about the so what piece or the performance piece, that's how you can really differentiate. And then I want to share a bit about what I've seen in terms of job search key success factors. We talked a little mistakes here is that there are my four M's that I talk about all the time is number one is this mindset, is to really have this winning mindset, right? If you're going to the job search saying that I'm not sure what's great about me, I just did like this as a job, you're not going to have this winning mindset. You're going to go in to pitch yourself effectively to an employer. So the mindset is key. One of the stories I always share is that I had a client many years ago. He was getting tons of interviews, but not closing. And one thing I asked him was that, what's your mindset going into the interview? And he responded that, I'm just going to go in to see for them to find out what's wrong with me. That was his mindset going in, like for them to find out what's wrong with me. So you can imagine how you're approaching the interview, right? So as soon as we switch that mindset thinking, I'm the most qualified the candidate, I am marketable, I have something valuable to share, it shifts the way of how he showed up and he got like the offer instantly there. So that's one. The second is the messaging. And I'm sure you guys know the messaging piece is really around this whole positioning, the sound bites, the tagline, really getting crystal clear and making sure it really aligns overall. And the third piece is marketing. So this ties into really putting yourself out there, whether it's marketing yourself on LinkedIn, networking, that all is going to help you increase the visibility, which helps you generate more opportunities there. And then lastly is the meeting people. So this is like AKA networking there. Most of the times I would say most people find awkward networking or relationship building. But from my experience, having worked with so many clients now, is that when you really are willing to put yourself out there to meet people, you'll discover and uncover like new opportunities.
Nice. Wow. Oh my gosh. You just unloaded so much value. Let me see if I can recap. So you talked about 3 major mistakes being lacking clarity of your target and what you really are going for. You talked about lacking a strategy of how to get from where you are now to where you want to go. And you talked about not diversifying your strategy enough to really differentiate yourself. And then your 4 M's, you said, I love that. It makes it so easy. You said your 4 M's are mindset, messaging, marketing, and meeting people, right?
You got
All
it.
of
You
those
got
are
it.
so important. I
Yes.
love it.
Yeah, I love it. That's good. Yeah, feel free. I just type it in as well. I find when you type it in, it reinforces the learning as well too, your key learnings here.
Yes, yes. If you're not taking notes already, you definitely should be.
Yeah, and you get an A for remembering all that, Leslie.
I know, that was great.
Just going back to the very first part of what you're saying, what came to mind for me was sort of, I don't know if it's a joke or an analogy, but it sounded like people do ready, fire, aim when it comes to their job search, and really want to shift that to the proper order, which is ready, aim, fire, and the steps that you discussed in terms of having clarity, being clear on, you know, your working on your messaging, working on your tactics, and diversifying all of that. That is the aiming part that people typically kind of skip over because they're so pressed to get to that next opportunity. They forget to really think about, well, where do I actually want to end up? And doing that work of checking with yourself first, which Leslie and I are huge proponents of. And of course, Diana, you as well. And the way you broke it down for us is really, really helpful. So thank you for doing that. Um,
Yeah.
and so as a lead into, you know, just the difficulty of the job search and how you have to really prepare, you wrote a post that caught my attention recently about quitting a job, which is something that is very difficult to do and takes a lot of inner work to get to that point, to actually pull the trigger and make that, you know, decision. And so when someone actually makes that very personal decision of quitting a job, two parts to this question. A, what are some things that they can do next in terms of getting themselves ready for the next opportunity? And B, what's your best advice around how to answer questions around, well, why did you leave your last job when quitting was the actual source of their departure?
That's such a great question. And I really want to take a moment to acknowledge anyone who is either contemplating this or has made this decision, because it could be such a stressful decision to make. I feel like this year, especially, particularly, I've been working with a lot of my own clients and even friends who have recently decided to quit their jobs. So it is happening. I find it really interesting right now. I'm also seeing even some of my former clients that I helped last year, or they started their new job less than a year ago, who decided to quit their job for something new as well. So it's been really interesting shift that I'm noticing. And part of it, I do feel it's because people are either expecting more, or either they're burnt out, or, you know, they want to do something that's more meaningful. That's what I'm noticing here. So a few things I want to talk about in terms of what to do after you quit your job. Right? It's such an emotional experience. Like, I'm even currently dealing with clients who are in this process. There's a few things that's happening. One is either you're feeling a relief. They're like, oh my God, I'm so glad I decided this. Or the other feeling is, I'm so overwhelmed that I need to figure out what to do next and job search ASAP. Like, people are telling me that I decided, and my friends and colleagues are saying like, so where are you going next? What's next? And there's this pressure that I need to figure it out. Right? So I want to acknowledge that it's okay to process these emotions there. So a few things I would want to recommend is, number one is to relax and recover. Right? If you've been in a job where you've been working crazy hours, you've been working for the last 2 years without a vacation, take this opportunity to give yourself a vacation and relax and recover. Like, I had a friend who called me a couple of weeks ago. She's at the C-level and she's been working her tail off for like the last decade. And I told her, I'm like, go pamper yourself, go to a spa, go or do nothing, sleep in. That's the first thing. Number two, by doing that, you're just going to feel like you can make better decisions, right? Number two is to take time to reflect, right? This goes back to the soul searching before job searching, is to really reflect on these career highlights of yours in the past, 5 years or decade. Like, what are things that you really enjoy doing? What are things that you really didn't enjoy doing? What are some things that you're saying yes to moving forward, and what you're saying no to? Part of that is also helping you set those boundaries and have a clear assessment criteria of how you want to move forward. So that's a reflection piece. The third then is what I call redesigning and resetting. your schedule and life, right? Because if you're used to working like 9 to 5 or even more crazy hours than that, all of a sudden you got all this time back. And we want to figure out what's this new routine in terms of your morning routine, your afternoon routine. What does that look like so you can get back into the groove of things and feeling that you're productive as well? Okay. What I really encourage here is do something that's going to fill your cup, that's going to give you joy, right? For me, like, for example, like I love going for like a manicure once a month. That's something that fills my cup, or going for a facial once a month. Whatever that is looks to you, that you want to do something that's going to make you feel good. And then lastly is what I call reconnect. Reconnect with yourself, but also reconnect with people around you, with your friends or people that, you know, who love you, who care about you. Reconnect with them as well. And then when you're ready, that you can start reconnecting with people who are more in your professional network, or recruiters when you're ready there. Okay, so those are the 4 things that I recommend doing instead of diving right into the job search. I have seen this time and time again. Those who do that, they don't perform well in their networking meetings or in interviews because they haven't processed their emotions yet.
That's such wonderful feedback. So before we go into the second question, just want to recap what you shared. And if I had to really sum it up, again, it is taking a step back to check in with yourself and do a pretty significant reset. You've been running at whatever pace, 100 miles an hour, however long it's been in your job. You chose to quit for a specific set of reasons that are valid to you. And it's really important to validate your decision and start by validating your emotions, as Diana said, as the first step. So you can have closure, if you want to call it healing, time to process, and doing that upfront mental work so you can show up as your best self when you actually relaunch into the job search process. So very quickly, again, she said, relax and recover. So yes, please do that. Take care of yourself. You'll need yourself to perform well in the search. Reflect. So going back to our very first points about trying to figure out what it is you want to do next, it's crucial so you can be clear in what you even ask for, let alone what you aim for as you go through the process. Redesign, resetting. What is your life going to look like as you look for work? And then finally, reconnecting. People is how most people find a job. And so reconnecting with yourself, with your friends, your family, and your network are all important steps that will help you be more successful as you move forward in the search process. And then going to part B of the question, someone has done all these steps. They're in the job search. They're ready. They're refreshed. They're raring to go. They get into interview situation and the interviewer asks them, so why'd you leave your last job? How does someone who quit their last job successfully answer this question and not throw their last company under the bus, talk about how horrible and toxic it was? How do you answer this question when you chose voluntarily to leave?
Yeah, that's such a great question. I feel like this is something I always have to go through with my clients as well, of answering why you left your last job. And so first of all, let's take a step back and think about why the employer would be asking that. They're really trying to understand, one is why did you actually quit? Like you voluntarily quit your job, or were you let go? Or were you like laid off or fired there? All right. So they're trying to understand that. Second is they're really trying to understand your motivation in terms of like what's important to you, right? In terms of why you left. So that's really the main reason why they asked this question there. So rule of thumb is we don't want to badmouth your previous employer, right? Instead, you want to focus on your desires, your goals, and needs instead. Because at the end of the day, they're trying to understand you anyways. They're not assessing the previous employer, right? So focus on that first. And so from there, some of the what I consider good reasons, right, to answer could be, one is either you can say, if you quit like that you needed a break. You needed a break for yourself. You wanted to take care of either family or needed that mental health break as well. Or it could be something like along the lines with there's a misalignment with your values of what's important to you, of your values to the employer's values. So that's better than saying that that you were in a toxic environment, or you hate your job, or you hate your boss, right? It's just a misalignment. It's a misalignment. People will understand what that is there. Or you can say something that for those who've been, say, the same company for like 5 years or a decade or more, you can say that you wanted a new challenge after being at the same company or industry for a long time. So therefore, you decide to quit to figure out what's next before you make this next move. And that's really valid. The clients I work with right now, that they've been in the same company for a long time, they want something new, something challenging, something more meaningful.
I really appreciate the point you shared that the employer is not trying to assess your previous company. They're trying to assess and get to know you. And so that was my key takeaway in terms of how to best think about how to frame that answer. Because certainly the number one rule is to not throw your previous employer under the bus. It doesn't make you look good. And who wants to hire someone who's going to, spill the tea about where they used to work whenever they're in an interview. And so by focusing again on yourself and being clear on why you left, that comes from having done that reflective work before launching into the job search process. And so that you can have a very strong answer as to your why behind quitting. And all the suggestions that Diana gave were great. And to really kind of take that on board, whether you are voluntarily leaving a job or if you're not, doing the work of figuring out your why for moving on is really important.
Yeah. I want to point out one more thing. Let's just imagine you started off and said, oh, I had a terrible boss, or it was such a toxic work environment. Just imagine that energy of how it's coming off. Right? Draining, right? You feel it draining already, right? And instantly, and I see this because as a coach, I tell my clients, just be transparent with me as well, right? That if you show up like this in an interview, it could easily go into a venting session. Mm-hmm. Right? If you go down that rabbit hole, it's like, oh, I just hate my boss, da 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 da. And so we just got to keep that in mind. Like, what's the energy that we want to portray in this meeting there?
Yeah. Right. That's great.
Yeah.
I really, really like that. And I like what I've gotten kind of from both of you on this topic is an idea that I also impart to clients, which is start with the truth. Whatever, for interviews, especially, whatever your real answer is, start with that with yourself as you're trying to prep, and then figure out how to present it in the most positive way possible. I think a lot of candidates go into the interview thinking that they need to give a right answer. You should give a true answer in a way that presents you in the best light or the best possible sort of positive of whatever the situation is. And I feel like that's kind of what both of you have said about this as well.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm curious to hear from the audience of what are some of the answers you've given out when you get asked why you left your last job. What was your reason? I'm curious to hear from any of you, like, what are some reasons that you've given out there?
Yes, that's a fantastic idea. If you've got a good one to share, or maybe one that didn't go over so well for you, you can share that as well. Okay, moving into the next question here. So also in a recent post of yours, you talked about finding work that aligns with where you want to go. And I feel like that's already been a thread through these first couple of questions. And it's definitely something that Niatu and I are both big proponents of. So what types of questions or exercises do you recommend for job seekers to identify the things that are important to them, and then to identify companies or roles that align with those things?
Yeah, that's such a great question. So this is all the self-discovery work, the career clarity work, right? When you do this work, it's really going to give you more of that clarity, confidence, and courage to move forward. So a couple exercises you can try doing. One is I like to do like a strengths, interests, and values assessment. So strengths is really getting understanding what do you naturally excel at? What are you really good at? So a few things you can do is either you identify them yourselves, or you send out a survey to your friends and colleagues to get a better understanding of your strengths, or you can complete like an assessment through the Strengths Finder Gallup assessment there. The second is the interest exercise. So this is interest around like type of problems you enjoy solving, type of like books you enjoy reading, what you like to talk about. Think of all these type of interest of yours there. And then the third piece is the values assessment. So this is going back to like what's important to you. Like what are your top 5 to 7 core values? And I recommend also having a definition of what it means to you, right? The way, let's say, I define authenticity, for example, may be different from you, or having a high value for respect could be very different from someone else. When you define that, it helps you also articulate that better of what that looks like to you in terms of the ideal type of boss or work environment that you're looking for, and also help you prioritize fit in terms of opportunities as well. Another exercise I like to do is to really think about your career highlights. So going back to your journey in your career, times that you have these what I call like peak experience moments. What are some of these highlights of yours that where you just feel like you were so proud, that you were so happy, that you found this moment of just joy and flow. And look for patterns and themes of what would that consist of, right? So for me, like when I even decided to become a coach, I knew that big part of my theme has always been having this impact on people. I wanted to do work related to people. And so that was a consistent theme, whether I was like a math tutor when I was younger, or I was, what do you call it? A newcomer, like welcoming like international students to university, or being an orientation leader. I was always doing something related to people. So I knew those were the core themes there. So I identified that. And so once you have that, it's really identified that going forward, you want to ask yourself, what are the primary skills you want to be using majority of the time? Majority of time, like if you think about in your work, what do you want to spend majority of your time doing? Like at least 50, 60% of the time doing this, or what that primary skill is. So as an example, like I have clients where they say they want a career in communications, right? A career in communications, is it the fact you enjoy the writing piece of communications? Or is it the fact that you enjoy speaking and training and delivery? What is that? So get clear on that, as that will help you pinpoint the type of roles that you'll enjoy doing there. And then lastly is to write a dream job exercise, like worksheet of writing out your own ideal job description. What are those primary responsibilities, the secondary responsibilities? What are the deliverables, the problems you want to solve, the impact you want to make? And that's going to help you gain more clarity there.
Gosh, every time you just drop all these gems, it's fantastic. I really love, just again, the idea of focusing internally on what means something to you, whether it's a strength that you have, like you said, identifying strengths and interests and values, being able to identify. And this is something that seems to open job seekers' eyes a lot, is looking back over your career successes and achievements and finding those common threads. So often we let our careers sort of happen to us. But when you can be more thoughtful and you can look back and see when you've been successful and what has been common throughout those experiences, that can be a really powerful, tool to help you decide on what's next. I love that.
Yeah. I just also want to share an insight as well. Not only it's going to help you decide, it's actually going to help you differentiate moving forward as well. Yes. By going through this exercise, you're going to start seeing these themes of yours and patterns of like, what's your competitive edge? And I know we're going to talk about that later on, but I want to emphasize why we do this exercise. Not only just help you gain clarity, but it's also going to give you this aha moment of like, oh my goodness, this is what makes me unique. This is what differentiates me. These are some patterns of how I make decisions. A very popular, not popular, like employer like Shopify, for example, they do life story interviews. And there's no set guideline on how to approach this interview. But when we think about it, why do they do life story interviews? Is they're trying to understand more about you, not just your qualifications, but your core values, your interests, how you make decisions, the choices that you made throughout your career, and whether you have the self-awareness to see these patterns as well of understanding where you should be pursuing your career there.
Yep. Yes. Excellent. It helps you to communicate. It helps you to just really speak for yourself. Going back to our last question, you requested some answers from folks about what they've said and how they've explained, why they've left. Someone said relocation. It's true. It's correct. Kate says, I say I did everything I could for the project. Michelle says, I've had someone say they simply don't like working with a bunch of men in a garage, and she wants to work in a regular office.
That sounds really honest.
Yeah. We do have a question, Diana, from the audience, if you don't mind.
Yeah.
Shanif wants to know, how do you guide the interview so you get to talk about these great points that you mentioned? Many times the interviewer may go down a path that doesn't allow for a broader discussion. That's a great question.
That's such a great question, right? Sometimes we can't predict necessarily the questions they may ask us. So this is what's important then, is that you do need to have some solid sound bites or punchlines. This goes back to like, what are the core key messages that you want to share with the employer, right? Even if they don't ask, how can you try to weave it in? And so you first need to really identify in terms of, I call it my top 3 unique selling points of what are these top 3 key pillars you want to talk about? And what are those stories that you want to highlight? And you want to weave that in. So as an example, let's just say if an employer starts off with the interview, they don't ask to tell me about yourself and they dive into like a very, very specific question, right? So you do want to answer that question. But perhaps what you can do is in that question, you could set a bit of context to give you a little background about what I've done, where I am now, and how I, approach this problem there. So you want to set that stage. So that could be a clue. Like if they haven't got that opportunity, giving you the opportunity to talk about it, you can take control. Like, perhaps it would be helpful for me to share a little bit more.
That's a really useful tool, and it's we're really big on empowering our listeners to be more proactive and just feel that they have the ability to control their destiny a bit more in their job search process. And those phrases that you mentioned just now, can I give it more background, and all of that is a great way to wrestle back a bit of that power and on your own terms deliver your narrative in a way that's most helpful and constructive to put across your candidacy in the most marketable and compelling way possible. And so that's really, really helpful.
Yeah.
Pivoting to the next question, everything we've spoken about so far to a degree is very applicable for someone continuing in a straight line in their career. But I want to switch and pivot for a moment to people who are career changers and who are themselves doing a pivot in what they're doing. And so I know that in your career as a coach and also as a recruiter, you must have encountered many, many individuals who are switching industries or functions or even both as they look to move on in the future. And so what are some of your top tips, 3 to 5 tips for candidates to position their experience effectively when they are indeed transitioning from one thing to another? And how can they help make hiring managers see their value given they're coming from a different context?
That's such a great question. So for those who are here, if you're pivoting, type in pivot and share with us, what are you pivoting from what to what? All right. So I want to understand a little bit of that. If you're pivoting, type that in and what you're trying to do. So this is such a great question. Like I work with so many clients pivoting, whether it's changing professions or function or changing industry. I want to say it's totally doable. So the first step is we need to identify what is it that we want to pivot to, right? That's the clarity piece. That's very important. The second is that we need to evaluate how big of a change that you're trying to make and to help you understand the level of difficulty of this change, right? So I have this graph here, as I call it. We look at change, right? Change in terms of industry and change of profession, right? So, and then if we think of a 2x2 box, if you're looking to change industry and profession, like that's this box at the top here, that's the hardest change to make, right? Changing industry and profession. Whereas if you're staying in the same industry and same profession, that's the easiest change to make, right? So the second easiest one to make that I see a lot of people do is that they say stay in the same profession or function, but a change in industry, right? And then the other one is that you are looking to change profession, but stay in the same industry there. Okay? So you want to evaluate what type of change you're making. Then you can assess that, okay, how difficult is this to change going to take you and whether it's going to be worthwhile your time there. Okay. And then from there is you want to go then research and understand the hiring requirements and needs of the job. So what does it take to be successful in this role? Whether it's reading job descriptions, going to check out people's LinkedIn profiles, setting up informational chats. You want to do these informational type of meetings and research so that you understand what are your potential gaps, what are the core competencies required, because this all going to help you with repositioning. If you don't understand what they're looking for, it's really hard for you to position yourself for success there. Most people don't do that work. I'll tell you this. Most people are like, oh yeah, I kind of know this is what they're looking for, and I'm just going to tweak a little bit and that's going to be it. It actually takes more strategy than that. And this is where the research has to come in. And then the next is then from there, once you understand that, this is where you have to really think, right? You can talk to someone or work with a coach to identify like, what are your core competencies and differentiation factors? Based on understanding these are the hiring requirements, the minimum qualifications, preferred qualifications, what are your core competencies that you want to highlight further? Right. So this is where we think about those transferable skills, the relevant knowledge that you have, or any relevant experience that you have, and then identifying the so what piece in terms of what is it that you have that will actually benefit this potential employer there. Okay. And then lastly, once you've identified this, is you got to come up with evidence of support. So these are the facts, the stories, the examples. You want to think about some really good examples to tell that where they can actually see, okay, that you're connecting the dots of how this would be helpful and relevant to the employer there.
I love your tendency to have just 4 clear actionable steps for everything. I don't know if you like live on a rules of 4 or something like that, but that's really helpful for the audience to think through. But
3 to 5. 3 to 5
yeah,
is a key.
right?
It's
Yeah, 3 to
yeah,
5
three
is
to five.
digestible, memorable, and all of that.
Yes.
I wanted to go back to that first piece because when it comes to transitioning, sometimes people don't necessarily think about the level of effort, the difficulty piece, and I hadn't heard anyone break it down that way before in terms of really mapping out how big a change is this, and therefore I'm hearing it as giving them a realistic runway or process to actually affect that change over time. Because some things you might want to do might involve getting another degree or a
Yeah.
certification, or other things are just far more transferable and therefore a lower level of effort, in terms of making that transition. And so it's very helpful to have that degree of clarity in terms of what do I practically need to do to get to this next step. And we can't underestimate the power of speaking to people, and so the networking, the informational interviews, and the research. Again,
Yeah.
I feel like a lot of what we're saying is prepare. If we have to boil
Preparation.
everything down, it's prepare. And we just want to encourage and everyone listening today that the preparation that you do up front, I'm sure you've seen it in other areas of your life where you rehearsing that speech 20 times allowed you to
Yeah.
deliver it almost flawlessly. If you play sports, you practice all the basics so you don't have to think about it when you're in the middle of the game.
Yeah.
Preparation is so important. And for some reason, we don't quite think of it the same way when it comes to our job search. We just think, okay, hit easy apply,
Yeah.
throw my resume out there and all of that. And then when the results are not what we anticipate, we then wonder why. And so all
Yeah.
3 of us here just want to really encourage all of you to take that pause, take that step back. Again, we recognize everyone's circumstances are different. Some of us may
Yeah.
not be able to take a 3-month, sabbatical and figure out, our
Yeah.
life.
Yeah.
But even still, if you have to do a rapid job search, it doesn't mean you can't think about what you want as you try and execute.
Yeah.
So with this pivoting, again, you're taking a step back, you are figuring out the level of effort, you're doing the research, and then the evidence is really key. What have you done that looks like, sounds like, smells like the skills they need in the new industry so you can really sell that story? And it's your job to connect the dots for the employer as to why you're a better fit or an advantageous hire over someone who's been in that line of work for a much longer time.
Yeah.
We
Yeah.
appreciate those tips.
I do want to say something to I'm hearing this is that, a lot of times when we're making this pivot, right, the common barrier is what? We lack experience, right? We lack experience. That's the common, say, feedback or the awareness that we know that we lack this experience. And that's a fair question. And so when you think about this, when you do this type of preparation, as an employer, the people you talk to, if you're really hungry for this, you really want this, they can tell whether you've done your work in preparation to do whatever it takes to make this goal happen. And that's part of the decision-making process that employers make, right? Not only just the qualifications, but the hunger, the enthusiasm for this opportunity as well, right? And it's also going to help you to assess, well, that it's maybe okay that for you to take a bit longer time to make this transition, right? I had a client recently. She switched from being an entrepreneur for 7 years at a marketing agency, a really successful marketing agency, and she really wanted to move to corporate. We met last year in April, and she recently landed opportunity. And so it's been a 1.5 year journey for her. You may say that's a very long time, but for some, an entrepreneur who needs to run their business and eventually shut down their business and to go network, do all this research and figure out how to do a resume and LinkedIn, that's a pretty big deal. And learn a whole new industry, build a new network. That's going to take time. But that's okay, right? As long as you understand that why you want what you want and whether you're really committed and dedicated to making this change, that's part of what matters as well.
Absolutely. And I love the idea that you're saying it's okay for these things to take time. And I
Hmm.
think it's important to also sort of just put the idea in there that if you are consistently checking in with yourself, you can start to catch discontent within yourself or unhappiness within yourself early enough that you can give yourself that time instead of just pushing and pushing and pushing, not taking the time to reflect on, why do I feel unhappy? Why do I feel unfulfilled? If you
Yeah.
are keeping your finger on your own sort of emotional pulse, you can put yourself in a position where you can take the time because you can still be employed while prepping for your next move and your next move ahead, so that that stress doesn't have to all come down at once. And of course, that's not always possible. I just want to put the idea that the more we
Mhm.
can check in with ourselves, the better off we'll be and the better position we can put ourselves in throughout our careers.
And that's what therapy is great for. Just got to throw that in there.
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely. Absolutely. All right, let's move into our next question. We've been talking a lot about interviews, and on one of your recent live shows, which, if you want to take a moment, Diana, and let people know when you go live and where else they can find you live.
Yeah, absolutely. So I have my live show called Dare to Differentiate, and I host it on my LinkedIn, my YouTube, and my Facebook as well. Typically, I go live once, like twice a month, like every 2 weeks on Thursday or Friday afternoon there, or 11 a.m. or 12 p.m. there.
Okay.
I don't have a set schedule right now because I have found that it works better for me to be in this flow state versus having to be in this rigid schedule right now.
I love it. And I love that
Okay.
you, again, you check in with yourself. You say, this works better for me. So this is what I'm going to do. And then you just make it work from there. That's wonderful.
Totally, totally. Yeah, I did live every week for the first quarter. And while that was great in doing it, but I realized that was not good for my soul there.
Yep. Yep. That makes sense. All right. So back to the question on your live show recently,
Mhm.
you featured 3 seasoned executives who have conducted hundreds of interviews, and you asked them to share tips on how to stand out as top talent in an interview. What can you share with our audience about how to do that for themselves?
Yeah, great question. I love that you guys pay attention to my show as well. Thank you for that.
You're
And I
awesome.
love,
We do our
yeah, thank you.
research.
I love it. This is like the preparation, the research. I love that, love that. And yes, you're right. I did ask 3 senior executives part of like the how to stand on interviews. And this is something I love doing with my clients. I would say the number one is going back is preparation, being well prepared. Employers can tell whether you're prepared or not. When you are prepared, the way you show up and the way you deliver your answers becomes more succinct and more effective there. So that's number one. Number two is I always say master your glowing introduction. So this is AKA your elevator pitch, right? Your career story, career highlights. I have a formula that I guide my clients through. I find most people, this is just from my practice as a coach as well, most people share their elevator pitch in a traditional chronological order from when they finished school to where they are now. Oftentimes it takes like more than 5 minutes, like 10, 15 minutes long. And that's too long. And so what you really want to do is you need to tailor it back to the role and the hiring need. So that's number two. Number three is you got to know your why messages. So this is really around your motivation. Why this company? Why this role? Why you? Why should they hire you? And I always talk about the difference. The common mistake I see people make is when they talk about why this role or why this company, it's really trying to understand your motivation of why you want to work for them. But the question of why you is more a pitch question where you want to nail of the benefits of hiring you versus just telling them why you want this job there. Okay, so that's something very important to distinguish there. And the next piece is really having strong, compelling stories and examples. This goes back to the evidence of support. From my experience, like having recruited at Google back in the day as well, I find that most people get rejected because they just don't have enough strong enough evidence, the stories to back up their claim why they're a great candidate to hire. So this is why we got to get strategic on identifying these great stories to tell there. Typically, I recommend having like at least 5 solid stories to tell. In instances where you are, let's say, interviewing for companies like AWS, Amazon, I have heard even from clients where they've been told to have at least like 15 stories to be prepared for. So you got to really essentially think hard and think deep as well there. And then lastly, it's all about connecting the dots. Right? If you're able to, what I mean by connecting the dots is essentially you're building a business case. Every time you're going for an interview, you're building a business case of why you are the ideal candidate to hire. So every time you answer a question, it's not just about telling the story, it's about telling the so what message of this story. How is this story relevant to this job? What did you learn from this experience? How does this experience help you become a better leader, a better problem solver? That's like really peeling the onion, the so what of it to really differentiate there. And I have to tell you, it's really, really hard. Like even when I work with my clients, oftentimes I need to ask like the question 3 or 4 times in a different way to help them really extract like what's the meaning of the story there? Like what's the so what from it?
Yes, yes. I love that you have mentioned the so what several times and connecting the dots several times. There is a strategy. And it's once you pick it up and once you understand that it's about like putting yourself in the other person's position, I think the strategy becomes a lot easier to just understand how to put it together. But for so many job seekers, they're not there yet. So explaining that strategy of getting to the so what, I think is really important. Why does that person sitting in front of you wanting to hire for that job? Why do they care?
Yeah.
You have to connect the dots for them. And I think you touched on something that I try to impart on interview coaching clients a lot. And it's the idea that hiring someone is a big undertaking for a company.
Mm-hmm.
It's expensive in terms of
Yeah.
money. It's expensive in terms of time. It's expensive in terms of training. And it's especially expensive if it doesn't work out.
Yeah.
So the best thing that the candidate can do to put that person at ease is to clear up red flags, to be very transparent. And that doesn't mean transparent in everything. It means laying out all the pieces and connecting all the dots so they can see that you are who you say you are. And when you have those proof points and those stories, like you said, that is how you put them more at ease. And that's how you make them like see that you're being honest and transparent.
Absolutely. And everything that you're talking about, Lezlie, here, everything of this whole prep ultimately is when by doing this, the goal is to become a more effective communicator. Right? Communication skills is one of the core skills employers look for, right? And verbal communication skills is even more important as well. So when you can have these very clear, concise, compelling messaging, and you're able to speak with confidence as well, it's so powerful.
Yeah. Yep.
And so, in addition to highlighting the so what, which I think is a really important takeaway for our audience, you also highlighted the why you aspect of it, which I think is a nice dovetail into the personal branding piece. You are not the only person going for this job, and therefore you're playing in a pool of candidates who are arguably equally qualified in relation to you at the very minimum as far as skill set. So if all things being equal, you're all equally as effective in executing the role, how do you therefore stand out? And I believe that's where branding comes in, and you happen to be a branding expert. So this is why we had this question for you. And so personal branding is definitely a challenge for a lot of job seekers. So in 2 parts, once again, how do you guide our audience to, number one, identify what makes up their unique value to distinguish their brand? And number 2, how do they then go about advertising and marketing this brand effectively to attract the right audience to them and help them get hired?
Great question. I love this. Are you guys ready to take some notes here? This is like one of my popular questions I get is how to identify your unique value. Like what really differentiates you? What's your edge, right? So really the first step is to evaluate and assess your expertise, right? So what I mean by that is really looking at your knowledge, skills, and experience, right? Doing an inventory of that, of what you have to offer there. The second step is to really evaluate your track record of success. So really, this is the proof, right? This goes back to your accomplishments, your results, your promotions, your performance. These are all the things that employers want to understand, right? So this is part of that evidence there, right? So once you have these two, the next is really the so what piece of identifying your competitive edge. And this is what's hard, right? Because this is from what I do as a coach is like, we got to really look at it objectively as well and identify, okay, so what? Like, what are your unique selling points? Is it the fact that you speak, let's say, another language that will give you an edge? Or is it the fact that you have international experience that would also give you an edge? Or is it the fact that you're always the one who's been tapped on doing these new transformation projects, for example? If that is like that's the case, and you want to talk about how this would be your competitive edge there. So what I like to do is I challenge people. It's like identify your top three, the top three unique selling points. Like think of it as a stool, right? You have a core theme, like a branding, your core theme of yours, and then you have these three pillars that identify in terms of your core competency, your unique selling points. And then at the next layer is then the brand stories. Like what are the brand stories we want to use to back up these three pillars that you're trying to sell yourself there?
No, that's really, really helpful. And so I think a recurring theme is the identification and the proof. I think a number of your answers are really centered upon that point. And just to add to what you shared, not only doing the inventory of what your top skills are and all of that, but which skills do you enjoy using the most? Harkening back earlier to what you said in terms of what skills do you want to be the core of the job that you're doing. It's one thing to be good at math, but if you hate math, you don't want to build your brand on that. And so
Exactly.
if you work at the intersection of the skills that you are good at and you enjoy using, I think that's a really helpful place to start building your brand. And then in terms of really driving that forward, it's about thinking about how to use those skills differently versus other people. So an example I gave recently is if there are two project managers who have the same function, one of them is relationally gifted, one of them is technically gifted. They can both deliver excellent results, but they go about it in different ways. So identifying how you employ those skills to get your results is a way to start differentiating yourself and really selling yourself. That might be a great fit for the employer that is looking to potentially hire you. Some might prefer a technical person, some might prefer a relational person, but being clear on what it is you do and how you do differently, that can help you stand apart, not only by identifying the skills, but again, how you employ them differently or better or uniquely versus others. And then going back to the second part of the question, how do you then go about advertising that? So I've done the identification work. I know what I'm good at. I got my three pillars. How do I start broadcasting that into the universe to get people to come to me?
Yeah, that's a great question, right? Like once you've identified it, how do I really activate it and promote it, right? That's really the key thing here. It just goes back to marketing, right? So a few things. Number one is you really want to first, like you really have an active online presence with a consistent tone of voice. So this is like going on LinkedIn in sharing your story, right? Sharing your expertise, right? And really that's really all about adding value to others, right? And the next is really networking, right? The big part of promoting your brand, it's you have to talk to people, because if you don't talk to people, how can they help get your message out? Right? When you talk to people, the way I think about it is that if you, let's say you talk to 10 people and these 10 people all refer you to two more people, that's another 20 more new leads that you're going to have, right? So you're really leveraging your network to also spread the message of your brand as well. Right? And so this ties into asking for endorsements, referrals, or even recommendations. Those are things that you want to ask for. And the next is that you really want to speak, like talk about your own highlights, your accomplishments as well, because that's the proof. If you don't talk about it, people won't know about it, right? Something I learned, I want to share with you guys too. Like I've realized like last year as a coach, I would be on these calls. And what's the number one question people always ask me is like, have you worked with someone like me? Or have really what they're asking is like, have you solved a problem similar to my problem, the challenge that I'm faced with, right? And so what they're asking for is then, okay, well, what's the proof there, right? I've had these testimonials on my website, but it was like outdated. And so then I started this year, I noticed is what I started this year is like I start sharing people's stories as well. And I realized like that's part of the proof. That's going to help you build your credibility as well, right? If you don't share that, people won't know there. Okay. And then lastly is you want to find mentors, coaches, or advocates to endorse you there. that's another big piece of promoting your brand, not only for looking for a job, but internally getting promotions, is you also want to have these sponsors or advocates to promote you there.
Awesome. That's really helpful. And I think the key takeaway is you have to talk about it. If you don't talk about it, no one is going to know. And you can't expect people to use telepathy or ESP to, deduce what your brand is and what you have to offer. You do have to do the work to put it out there. It's not easy for everyone. We want to certainly recognize and validate that fact that people have different levels of comfort around talking about yourself and putting yourself forward. But we have to recognize that it is a necessary aspect of the job search process. And the sooner you can work on gaining comfort with it, the better it will be for your job search prospects and your career advancement just in general, when it comes to even moving up within the same employer versus, finding a job elsewhere. On the branding piece, there are a couple of articles I wrote that might be helpful for the audience. One is called The Juice versus the Sauce, which is your professional brand. Just thinking about how to define it and all of that. Yeah. And the second one I wrote was around how 4 ways helping can define your brand. And so how you help others can be part of what you offer and differentiates you from other people. And so those might be helpful for those listening to go and check out and see if they're useful for you. But the personal inventory, we're all uniquely created, we're all uniquely gifted. And what Dan is saying over and over again is do the work to tap into that uniqueness so you can offer it in a clear manner that an employer can see, okay, I want Diana, or I want Lezlie, or I want Niatsu versus somebody else, because I can see that how they're wired, how they're gifted, how they operate would add value to my environment. And until you're clear on it, no one else can be clear on it. Until you're clear on it, you can't present it in a way that's digestible for the audience.
Yeah. I want to ask the audience for you to think about, like, what do you want to be known for? Right? What do you want people to come to you for? Right? Think about that, and then that's going to be your guide in terms of what can you start talking more about or sharing about there. So share that with us, which I think is a great segue to our next question as well.
Yes, absolutely. And I just want to highlight real quickly that not only do we have some common threads in terms of, self-inventory and clarity internally, clarity and communication externally. I think another common thread that has come up several times is other people, relationships, conversations, connections with other people. The job search doesn't exist in a vacuum. No person is an island entire unto him or her or themselves. We are out there together, and we do better together. And asking for help doesn't have to be a bad word. It doesn't have to be this thing that we're afraid to do. So I definitely want to point out that thread as well.
You're absolutely right. You know what, Leslie, I have to say something, because I work with a lot of senior level clients. A lot of times I find my senior level clients find it actually harder to ask for help.
Why do you think that is?
I think part of it is they may see it maybe perceived as a weakness, right? Asking for help, or they may feel a bit of that shame or embarrassment of asking for help, that there may be this feeling that I should know it, or I should already have it, like I should have my act together. And when really I would say at the level or senior level, to me, it's actually more important to reach out and ask for help.
And why do you think that is?
Because that's where you find these hidden opportunities, or opportunities that it's not yet posted, but it's through these discussions, these conversations, where you are identifying needs, opportunities, or even newly developed created opportunity as well. That to me, like that's part of the secret sauce. When I think about it, the secret sauce of identifying a newly created role. Like I'll give you an example. Like a year ago, I worked with a client who was making transition from healthcare at the hospital to long-term care. So from public to private. And the way she landed the opportunity was she reached out to her friend who worked at this company she was interested in. And this friend who was a consultant for this company, who then introduced her to the CEO of the company. And that's like, for her at first, it's like, oh my God, what am I going to talk about with the CEO, right? Yeah. But we got really clear back to her value prop, what she's clear on. And ultimately, she met the CEO, impressed him with her experience and leadership skills and her relationship building skills. And that led to the CEO introducing her to talk to other VPs at the company. And that led to then her talking to the VP of talent acquisition. And eventually, a brand new role was created for her. It was a combined new role of like partnerships and like quality or operations. And then a few months after she started the job, she got promoted to a senior director role, from director to senior director. And so to me, the reason I share this story is it's so beautiful that we just don't know. Like, if had she not started this conversation or check in the needs, this newly created opportunity would not have happened.
Yes. Putting yourself out there leads to bigger returns. It absolutely does.
Yeah.
Real quickly, Andy put up the links to the couple of articles that Nia2 mentioned. So check those out. Both of them are there in the chat. So you can click on both of those links and get to that. All right, let's get to our next question here. I know we're already over the hour, but this is just going so fantastically. Actually, we've had some happy people here. We've got someone saying, such great information. Thank you all for these nuggets. Joshua says, this has certainly been one of the best live sessions so far.
Yay.
Great behind hiring. Thank you. There's so much in this. I'm going to have to go back and watch it again. Me too. Me too. Absolutely.
Awesome.
Okay. So on that topic of putting yourself out there, communicating with people, I know you touched already on the idea of being active on LinkedIn, sharing content and kind of doing those things. Part of personal branding for job seekers and career professionals these days really does include sharing content and even creating your own personal content on LinkedIn. And this, it's a new idea. It seems to be a very intimidating idea for a lot of job seekers. So what tips can you share to help a job seeker or a career professional get started in doing these things? And especially as it relates to like what type of content they should be sharing, what messages are they trying to convey, and how is this, sort of new activity, how is it, so important to the job search in their career?
Yeah, that's such a great question. And I've noticed this past year, especially this past year since the pandemic, even my own clients are asking me, like, how do I get started out in terms of posting content online on LinkedIn? And most people don't feel comfortable. So I would say the first advice is like start small. Start small, commit to a routine that works for you. So this could be maybe posting once a week, or even once every 2 weeks, or even once a month, whatever that looks like. Start small, commit to routine. And then we want to ask yourself is, what's really your intention? What's the purpose for you to share content? Like, what's your intention there? Get clear on that, because that's going to drive your direction. The second is like, who are you writing it for? Keep your audience in mind. So for those who are job seekers, are you trying to get more new opportunities? Are you trying to appeal to employers or recruiters? Get clear on that there. Or are you trying to be known as a thought leader in your industry, right? I have some clients who are at the C-level. They want to be seen as a thought leader. So get clear on that. And then from there is think about, well, what do I really want to be known for? What is it that I truly want to be known for? What do I really want to share? Right? And that's going to drive the type of content you're going to write. So I recommend usually in terms of the type of post or content to start is one is like a storytelling post, so sharing a little bit about yourself. The second type would be expertise type of post, sharing your area of expertise, or like the how-to type of posts, or having a point of view to showcase your expertise in this area. So I'll give you an example. I recently had a C-level client. He wrote his first LinkedIn article, and I was so proud of him. And he actually works in the pharmaceutical industry, but he told me that, that he has to be very careful because working in pharmaceutical, there's a lot of regulations of what you can talk about and all that. And, with the pandemic and all that, you got to be careful. So instead, he wrote an article about marketing in the automotive industry, about a brand and advertising that was really good. And it was a case study. And that was able to showcase his assessment of how he evaluated this like advertising marketing campaign of his. And I thought that was brilliant, right? You don't have to necessarily talk about your own industry, but at least you can still showcase your marketing expertise of pinpointing what are some things that they did really well with his campaign there. Okay, so that's another type of post. And then the other would be more like the announcement posts, like for those who right now, let's say quitting a job. I actually recommend to share. You don't have to say I quit a job. You can, if you want to have like a farewell message to thank your employer, right, of everything that you learn, have this announcement post, because what's going to happen is it's going to go into your feed and people in your network are going to know about it. And they're going to reach out and be like, hey, like what's next? And that could be an opportunity to start a conversation there.
Yes. Yes. All of these things are just so important. There are so many little pieces of return that doing this activity on LinkedIn can bring you. I love that you talk about starting small. I think that can help alleviate the intimidation and the fear around it a little bit. Just scroll through your LinkedIn and like someone's comment or like someone's post or leave a comment that just says, wow, I hadn't thought of this, or, oh, this taught me something. Just get your feet wet with those little things. And even that can help you, in those next stages that you mentioned of identifying what is important to me. How do I like to come across? You may not know the answer to those questions right away, but starting small can help you figure that out. And I think that that's
For
great.
sure. Yeah. And I want to emphasize for those who are looking to pivot, to change, if you feel like you lack the experience, but if you start talking about it, it's actually going to increase your credibility and knowledge, right? I have a client who wants to move into sustainability finance. She has a finance background already, but she wants to particularly go into sustainability. And I said, start talking about sustainability finance.
Yep.
And that's going to change the perception of how people see you.
It is. And one of the things that I think not enough people think about is not only does your LinkedIn content exist out there on LinkedIn just sort of on its own, it can be a really fantastic, further proof point for interviews or the interview process. Because if you come on a topic in an interview and it's something that you've, written about or posted about, you can say like, oh, I actually just posted about this recently. I'll send it to you in my follow-up after our interview. And that just becomes further proof points of not only do you believe or are you saying it in an interview, you believe it, you've talked about it before, you've shared on it in public spaces, and all the more that helps to build your authority.
Yeah. I want to give a challenge for the audience who's here. If you are serious about getting started and those who are like job seekers trying to build your brand, I want to challenge you to write 3 articles. Not just posts, but articles. The reason I have articles is that it is something easy for employers to look at, because it's on the top there. And I'll give you a story, like why I believe this works. Like I had a client in digital marketing last year, finishing his MBA, 10 years of experience, and he's a digital marketing expert from an ad agency. And I said to him, well, you are an expert in this space, but you have not posted for the last 3 years. Last 3 years, right? I was like, you have to start posting and even having these articles. And as soon as he wrote 3 articles, like one about his experience and another about a case study for like small businesses of how he helped. I forgot the third one. But once he had that, he had like 9 interview opportunities. 9. It was crazy. I was like, because of doing this work that you've been putting off, all of a sudden he had like 9 interview opportunities. Like that changed the game in terms of his offers. Like he was able to negotiate more because all of a sudden he positioned himself as an expert.
Right. I think it just goes to highlight you never know who's watching, especially on a platform like LinkedIn. Your reach is exponential and it's to your advantage if you take the step. You might even feel like it might be a bit of a risk, but put yourself out there. I have a client who's trying to transition, ironically, to sustainability as well. She's in a supply chain right now. She happened to start a sustainability group within her current company. They've done some work, had some good success and initiatives, and she wrote an article about sustainability in her industry and talked about some of the work she's currently doing. That's an amazing platform for her to pivot into the area she wants to go to by talking about what she loves, is into, is actually doing right now in that area. Even though it's not her core responsibility, it's where she wants to go. So she's starting to design her path there by putting out a think piece and relating her experience in the area already. And all of you can do that.
Yep.
You don't have to start a resource group, but you can talk about something you're passionate about. And an article is a great suggestion to get yourself started. That's how I got myself started. I wrote an article a month when I first launched my practice back in 2019. And that helped me to get to where I am today. And so, if I can do it, I don't think myself special or any more talented or anything like that. You guys have the ability to do it as well. Just talk about what you love, what you know, and there will be an audience out there for you.
Mm-hmm.
And we just have a few more questions, just three. The last two are short. Final one here. Thank you to all of you who are still with us. Please continue to hang. We're going to start to land the plane. Our flow is to let the conversation end naturally and try to get to our questions because we think they're all valuable. So that's how we do it over here. So culture is a really important thing to me, something that I talk about as often as I can when it comes to my posts. Recognizing that living in the United States, you live in Canada, these are multicultural societies. If you want to call them melting pot, that's a loaded term in some ways as well. But there are a lot of people from different places where we live, Toronto, Jersey, New York, what have you. Navigating culture can be a challenge if you're coming from one culture into another and you find yourself doing a job search. And so I imagine that you've had a fairly, diverse client base in your work so far. And so I'm curious to understand, how have you helped your clients navigate cultural differences as they go through a job search and help them to find success while still embracing their culture and navigating within a new one?
This is such a great question. Thank you for asking that, too. I think so. I would say, first of all, like I can actually totally relate to this, right? Because I moved here to Canada when I was 16, and I often struggled as well that the East versus West type of culture values as well. So I think part of it is we need to recognize what are those challenges, like what are those challenges first, like seek to understand like what are those challenges that we're faced with. From my experience, having worked with newcomers as well, there's often this intimidation factor, right? That feeling English is not my first language, so therefore they're not willing to really speak up or to really own their own value or being confident in selling themselves, right? That's something we need to recognize. And so, and even the simple thing is like, when I think about East versus West, like growing up, I was raised to not talk about our own accomplishments, try to just play down like our accomplishments. And I had to really learn, this is why I do what I do in terms of helping people stand out, is I had to really learn that process. So I think the key here is the work I do with people is learning to value yourself. First is to value yourself. And what I mean by that is we need to, identifying our own value, right? In terms of what makes us unique, marketable, qualified, like what are we good at, whatever that is identifying that. And then from there is we got to believe in ourselves. Like there's a difference between just saying, yeah, this is what I am. But there's a shift when you say like believing like this is really who I am. This is what I have to offer, right? There's this belief piece. When you believe that, you speak with more conviction as well. Like I used to have a very soft tone of voice. Even when back in university, I had the softest voice in class. Like I was told if I didn't speak up, I would fail. Like that's how bad it was. So I had to really learn to do that. But first also I had to believe that what I had to say is valuable. And then lastly, then it's really what we call conveying your value, right? So this is speaking up, really talking about it. And for those who may have a hard time articulating that thoughts, the way I like to think about it is I like to think of things in threes and 3 to 5s, 3, 4, and 5s. Like it just makes it easier. Like I used to be a math tutor, so I like to think things in simple 3, 4s, and 5s, and you're going to be able to get your point across, right? Identifying the soundbite, the punchline, and then from there you elaborate what that means and you give a story, right? So follow like a type of framework of how you want to speak, and that's going to naturally help you there.
No, that's really, really helpful. Thank you so much. And I think we just want to start with that point about recognizing your value and then validating and embracing that. We here at Behind Hiring, we believe that you all have inherent value. Your job, your bank account, your status in society, that doesn't dictate your value. Your uniqueness and what you bring to the table, how you offer, how you're wired, that's where your value is. And everything that we've said in this conversation so far is about trying to identify it, harness it, and then, deploy it into the world in a way that other people can understand what that is so they can come on board and see how amazing you really are. And so that's where that inner work comes in. And then that belief piece that you just shared, if you don't believe it, how are they going to believe it? How are you going to convince someone to believe it if you don't believe it yourself? And so you got to believe your own hype. You got to believe your own story and have conviction in your own narrative in order to confidently convey it to your audience and have them come along with you for the ride. And when it comes to your culture, there's no right or wrong when it comes to culture. You have your culture and I have mine. And so it's trying to find the value that your culture can offer. And let's say, for example, you're coming from a collectivist culture, and the family unit, the group, and all of that is prized above the individual. Well, in a company, that's not a bad thing to be. I really am going to ride hard for my company because that's how I was raised, to value my community and give my best effort to elevate my community above myself. And so that's a way to try and pivot or spin your cultural value in a way that's going to align and be beneficial within a context that may not be your original culture, but they can still see the benefit of having someone like you on their team. And so it's not that you're less than or your culture is less than, it's how can it add to the organization. And that's what we want to really try and highlight in order to best navigate any cultural differences that come across.
Yep. And I also just want to expand on that idea that Nia too mentioned, that, you know, your culture is valid. We talked a lot today, and we talk a lot on Behind Hiring, and all three of us, I think, in our own personal content, we talk a lot about alignment and finding work that aligns with you. So it is perfectly valid for you during your sort of self-assessment inventory phase to decide that your culture is important enough to you to want to be able to bring it to work, or at least be yourself and be comfortable as who you are, even within your culture at work. It's perfectly valid for you to decide that, and then just make that part of your search and the decisions you make for the companies and the roles that you go after. That can absolutely be one of your main priorities.
Yep. Good.
All right.
Yep.
Last two quick fire questions. Think of this as the lightning round, and then we're going to land this plane. If you could wake up tomorrow and the one thing that you felt was really broken in the hiring process was fixed, what would it be?
Oh, such a great question. Okay, I want to ask the audience what their takeaways are as well, because since we're wrapping up, what are you learning as well? What would it be if I could fix the hiring? I think part of it is the transparency and communication, the status of hiring, like the feedback. Like I wish, like when I think about my clients when they get a rejection, like I wish that they could get the feedback. Like I wish that they're kept in the loop of the status of things, and that just gives people more that less of anxiety, I think, right? If they know what's happening and get that feedback so they know how to improve. Like ultimately they just want to improve. They want to get better and better. Right.
Yeah.
I think that would be ideal. I think it's ridiculous if people have to wait for a very long time. Like one of my clients this summer, she holds the most patient record of waiting for a job offer for the entire summer for them to figure out what the job offer looked like, because it was coming from the government. And I was like, most people don't wait that long, but because it was her dream job, she was willing to wait. But I think in today's market right now, employers need to be on top of their game in providing a great candidate experience to attract talent, and also need to step up their game in managing the employee experience to retain talent as well.
I hear that. I've had prospective clients who did not end up working with me because they found someone else who might have been a bit better aligned, but they still recommended their friends to come to speak to me because they had a good experience in our consultation process. And so if you treat people well in your interview process, they may very well still let other people know you're a great employer, even if they didn't get chosen as a candidate.
You're absolutely right. I have to tell you, like when I recruited at Google, I mean, I rejected more people than accept, right? But I was amazed that I would have the people who I rejected who would also refer candidates to me. And I really think this goes back to how you treat each other, right? Even though they're rejected, but you want to show that I value you and your time as well. So thank you for highlighting that. I think that is so key, because you just never know what may come back, or eventually they may get hired eventually as well, right?
Yep. All right, we have one more question. Before we get to that, I just want to highlight some more really, really strong comments we've gotten from folks. We have had a couple of people ask, where can they find one-on-one help? Diana, should we just direct them to your profile and maybe send you a DM? Or is there a better place for them to find you?
Yeah, absolutely. So you can connect with me on LinkedIn, send me a DM there, or go to my website at mymarketability.com. And if you feel like I'm the right fit, feel free to book a consultation call with me as well there.
There you go. So if you want her one-on-one expertise and helping you brand yourself for your job search or your career, you can reach out to her. We have some great comments. Another person, Shanif, has said, this is one of the best sessions held. Thank you to the three of us. Well done. Candace says, Diana always provides many useful targeted tips for success. She is authentic, enthusiastic, and generously gives of her time to serve others. Absolutely.
Thank you, Candace.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Let's
Thank you.
see here. Michelle had a comment just about LinkedIn, seeing many people on LinkedIn who identify a post that may resonate with them, but they simply post without offering a message. We wouldn't know if they're seeking work or anything. So it's good to if you do share, say something, about it, really put yourself into it. We've got some folks who shared some takeaways here. Michelle shared a takeaway, says, believe in your own hype and practice your story. What do you think? Is that a good one?
That's a good one. Yes.
We've got another one here. Branding and communication are key for the takeaway. Put together what your sweet spot is, research, and then sell it. Oh, so good.
Love it.
So good. Okay, one last question here. All right. If you could reveal one employer insider secret to job seekers that would help them get hired more quickly, what would that insider secret be?
Yes. So the insider secret, I would say, is to really showcase that you are a high performer and high potential talent. Right. So not only showcasing your qualifications, but bringing out your personality, these soft skills as well, to showcase that not only you can do the job, but you can also excel and exceed in your job and be a benefit to the employer there. That's really the key, right? If you're just telling a story like this is the experience I have, the skills, it's not going to be enough to really differentiate. So I really want to challenge you to think about hey, what makes me awesome? What makes me amazing? And how can I help you there?
Yes. Love it. Love it. Yeah. Love it. Is there any final thing that you'd like to impart? I know we're way over, so we're going to give everybody their time back.
Yeah. We'll wrap up here. So I'm just going to wrap up with this, because I talk about how to differentiate. And I know a lot of you here looking at how to stand out to get opportunities. So one of the formula that I always talk about to get more opportunities is you want to increase your marketability, which is essentially your branding, improve your resume, your LinkedIn, your elevator pitch, your cover letter. That's the marketability piece. You want to increase your visibility. So this is being active, right? Online, on LinkedIn, or networking. You also want to increase your credibility. So this is really your reputation, your brand, having that track record of success where you get endorsements and referrals as well. And then lastly is to increase your likability. So this is really the soft skills, the warmth factor, your presence, your energy, your vibe there.
Gosh, love it. Love it. Niatu, do you have anything else?
I think, well, first off, thank you, Diana, for a really great conversation. I was expecting a lot, and it was even better than I thought it was going to be. So that's great. And so just thank you for your preparedness and just kind of demonstrating what it is you spoke about, walking the walk, if you like, and really, showing all of us that these things are accessible. You broke it down, and it really, again, starts with that self-preparation and that self-reflection. And we just want to encourage all of you out there to take that time, however much time you can take that important step of doing the self-reflection, because it will pay off in your marketing materials, in your messaging, in your credibility, in your visibility, all these different things that Diana shared. It all starts at preparation. Someone shared earlier that, you wouldn't show up to a test without having studied. And so all these things are around. I want to give her credit, but I can't find her name right now. But I think it was no, anyway, I can't find it. But do that preparation work and you will be better off for it. And you'll thank yourself down the line when you have that amazing job you wanted. Andrew Koppel, there we go. If you take that time up front. And so we just want to recommend and encourage all of you to pause, however long you can afford to pause, and do that work, and you'll thank yourself.
Yeah.
Absolutely. All right. Well, thank you to everyone. Thank you, Diana, again for being here. We will let you all go. I'll have some information about Diana on our end screen. So if you want to hang out for just a second, and you'll see how to best contact her. But otherwise, I hope everyone enjoys the rest of your Tuesday. I hope you have enjoyed what Diana has shared, and go follow her. She's putting out content all the time that just has so much value. So definitely be sure to do that. Diana, thank you. Nia too, thank you. You guys have a
Thank you
great week. We'll
so
talk
much.
soon.
Have a great, wonderful day, everyone. Thank you.
Take
Bye
care, everybody.
now.
Bye.